Hey guys, today I thought we would go ahead and swap out the trigger as well as the connector bar for this Glock. Basically what I'm doing is I'm going to take out the old stock Glock trigger assembly and put in a trigger assembly designed for competition. It's a shorter trigger pull, it's softer, easier to pull, be about 3.5 pounds when we're done. Right now this is the factory uh, trigger that's in this gun, so we're looking at about 5.5 pounds, 6 pounds worth of trigger pull. So this is just a standard Glock Model 22, and the first thing we want to do is take the magazine out, make sure that the gun is completely empty. As you can see, it is. Rack it a few times, point it in a safe direction, pull the trigger, and we're going to go ahead and take it down. We're going to set the slide assembly off to the side. We don't need to do anything with the slide to do this. This is pretty straightforward. Now, in order to take out the trigger assembly, you're going to have to remove the pins that are in the gun. And this is easy enough to do if you have a Glock armorer's tool. If you don't have a Glock armorer tool, you can use pretty much any kind of a pin punch that will just push out these small pins. Doesn't matter really which ones you start with, but this one back here is usually the one I start with. I just push it out. It's a plastic pin, and I put it in this magnetic dish. Even though it won't stay in the magnetic dish, it's just a good habit to get into. Putting your pins, screws, bolts, whatever into this small magnetic dish. That way if something happens, you don't lose them. Next pin we're going to take out is this top pin here. Just push it through. It's a locking block pin. And then this one here sometimes is tricky and gives people trouble. Sometimes it's easy enough to deal with. I push from this side usually, and what you need to do is lift up on the slide release lever a little bit, wiggle it, and it'll push right on through. You remove the slide release lever, put it in the dish as well. And then using a small tool like maybe a screwdriver, or in this case the armorer's tool, you're just going to pull out the locking block. And it just slides out. Now you're ready to take out the trigger assembly. You don't have to do anything else to the gun at this point. That's it. Take it out. Now what we're doing is we're also replacing the connector here. And this is your factory connector. This is a total factory trigger system, and I'll hang on to this. If I ever want to take it back to its factory original, I can just pull out the replacement trigger system, put this right back in, and back in business. So we can just set this off to the side for now. One of the things that I want to do with this is a trigger system from a company called Kineti-Tech, and I like the quality of it. I've used it a little bit, and it's pretty impressive to me. I like it. It's not as expensive as the Zev or some of the other ones that are designed for competition, but I do like this one a lot. But one of the things I want to do is I want to lessen this trigger bar here to take the poundage down to about 3.5 pounds. The way to do that is you pull this forward a little bit, and you can see there's a spring in there, and it moves. That's your trigger spring. So we're going to just turn this a little bit and just pull it up a little bit out of the way like so. The bar here is only in on its own pressure. There's a small groove right here that it fits into. Typically what I do is get a small screwdriver and gently underneath it just lift it and wiggle, and you'll see that it's starting to come up. And you don't want to force it because you can bend it. And then when it gets to the point where you can just pick it out, you just pull it out. That's all there is to it. Okay, pretty simple. So we have our replacement, which is from Ghost. These are pretty popular for connectors. So let's take it out. And this is pre-polished. And what you do with the polishing, and we're going to talk about that here a little more in a minute, but the polishing reduces the amount of friction between the metal parts that all make contact with one another while it's in the gun. And I have also polished this up just a little bit more, and I'll do that here also so that we can see. I use a product called Flitz, and you can get this at pretty much anywhere. Like a lot of your bigger gun stores will probably carry it. It's used as a metal polish, and I use it with a Dremel polishing wheel. And you just put a tiny, tiny, tiny bit where you want it to be. In this case, we're going to have metal rubbing on metal right here. And you may be able to see that it's a little shinier than the other parts of this particular piece. But what I'm going to do is put a little Flitz on here. And I'm going to fire up my Dremel. Might be a little noisy, stand by. And what we're going to do is we're just going to let the machine do the work. We're just going to polish it. When it turns black like that, you know it's doing its job. Flitz is some of the best stuff you will ever use on a firearm or anything that you want to give a good polish to. It's amazing. Now, you're not really doing anything other than just removing surface discoloration, maybe a little coating that might be on there. You're not harming anything, you're not changing anything. You're just making it a little easier for the pieces of metal to rub against one another. And I'm not really putting a whole lot of pressure on this. I'm just touching it pretty gently because this wheel is doing its job. And so that looks pretty good. You can get it to like a mirror finish. It's really amazing how well it turns out. So we know that this is pretty well polished. Alright, now we take our new connector and promptly drop it. Take our new connector, we put it right back where the old connector was. One thing you might notice is once it's in, you'll see that it doesn't sit flush, and that's by design. You want it to sit like this because it puts pressure up against the transfer bar, which rides up against the inside of the frame of the gun. That keeps it from popping out from being hooked underneath this little ledge right here that actually drops your striker. So to put it all back together, all we do is we don't, as you notice, we didn't take anything off, we didn't disconnect the spring. All we do is just stick this back down inside the opening. We turn it just a little bit till that top portion slides into this slot back here. Now, don't freak out if you see that as it is right there. Don't worry about it, because when it goes back in the gun, you're going to adjust that and make it sit up against there flush. So we just drop it back in like so. And your new trigger system is in. Just make sure that nothing's sticking out and that it fit in flush and it looks fine. So what I'll do now is I'm going to put the locking block back in. I put the locking block pin in first, and it goes across, and then we take our slide release lever because the spring on the slide release lever pushes up against the pin that we just put in. So this needs to go in second, like so. It has a hole that the trigger pin will fit through to hold this into place on the frame. So we slide that in there, and if you look through the hole you can see that where the hole is for your slide release. We take our pin, we might have to wiggle it just a little bit, and it pops in like that, and you're good. Don't worry if that's not perfect. You can make it a little better just by pushing this through just a tiny bit, even it up. Our last pin is the rear plastic pin. You can put them in any order, but it's important to remember that to put in the slide release stop, you need to put in the top pin first so that you can hook this spring underneath it. Put that through. That's good to go. Reassemble like so. Seems to work. Now we would take that to the range and test fire it and go from there. And as you can see, it's pretty simple, and that's how you do it. Thanks for watching.